2 hours from now, Samuel Mercer would be dancing with the most powerful being in three galaxies while the universe held its breath. 2 hours from now, he would feel the warmth of her laugh against his chest, the first genuine sound of joy she had made in 50 years. 2 hours from now, an explosion would tear through the crystal halls of Horizon Station, and everything Sam thought he knew about his place in the cosmos would shatter along with the chandeliers. But right now, at this precise moment, Sam was crawling through a maintenance shaft on Deck 7, his 68-year-old knees protesting every inch of progress, trying to fix an air filtration unit that nobody else wanted to touch. The shaft smelled of recycled oxygen and machine oil, familiar scents that had become the texture of his existence over the past 3 years. His tool belt clinked against the metal walls as he shimmied forward, the sound echoing in the darkness like a lonely heartbeat. The filtration unit had been malfunctioning for 6 days. Sam had filed 3 separate maintenance requests. Nobody had responded. Nobody ever responded to Samuel Mercer's requests because nobody particularly remembered that Samuel Mercer existed. He was the old man who fixed things, the ghost in the walls of America's most prestigious diplomatic space station, the invisible hands that kept the toilets flushing and the air breathable while ambassadors and dignitaries walked past without a glance. Sam reached the damaged component and pulled out his flashlight, illuminating the problem immediately. A simple seal failure, maybe 20 minutes of work for someone who knew what they were doing. He had known what he was doing for 47 years now, ever since a drill sergeant in Fort Benning had shoved a medical kit into his trembling hands and told him that his job was to keep soldiers alive long enough to die for something that mattered. The memory surfaced unbidden, as memories often did in the quiet darkness of maintenance shafts. Desert sand, the taste of copper and fear. Corporal Danny Wheeler's intestines spilling through Sam's fingers while mortars painted the sky orange. His hands had been shaking so badly he could barely thread a needle, but he had done it anyway because Danny had a wife in Tulsa and a baby daughter he had never met. Danny had lived. Sam had carried that steadiness with him ever since. The knowledge that hands could shake and still do the work that needed doing. He finished the repair and began the slow crawl back toward the access hatch, his back screaming complaints that he had learned to ignore years ago. The station hummed around him, a constant vibration that most people stopped noticing after the first week. Sam had never stopped noticing. He listened to Horizon Station the way a doctor listened to a heartbeat, alert for the subtle variations that might signal trouble. Tonight, something in the station's rhythm felt wrong. He could not identify it precisely, just a vague unease that settled in his chest as he emerged from the maintenance shaft and dusted off his coveralls. The corridors of Deck 7 were busier than usual, staff members hurrying past with the focused anxiety of people preparing for something important. Sam remembered then. The wedding, the Valdorian royal wedding that had been dominating news feeds for months. Princess Lyria, niece of the great Queen Elindra, marrying Prince Theron of the Crystalline Empire in what diplomats were calling the most significant alien-human cultural event since first contact. The ceremony would take place here, on Horizon Station, America's crown jewel of interstellar diplomacy. 300 dignitaries from 47 species. Security protocols that made the Secret Service look casual. And Samuel Mercer, maintenance technician 3rd class, would be exactly where he always was during important events. Invisible, forgotten, and probably elbow deep in someone's malfunctioning waste reclamation system. A young woman in a crisp security uniform rounded the corner, her stride purposeful and impatient. Lieutenant Kira Valdos, if Sam remembered correctly. 25 years old, decorated for bravery during the Proxima Station incident, and possessed of the particular contempt that young officers often reserve for support staff. She noticed him standing there and her expression flickered with something between annoyance and dismissal. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone who had more important things to do. "You, maintenance, the ambassador's private bathroom has a pressure issue. Fix it before the reception." Sam nodded, years of practice keeping any reaction from his face. "Which ambassador would that be, ma'am?" Lieutenant Valdos was already walking away, her words floating back over her shoulder like an afterthought. "Webb, the human one, obviously." She disappeared around the corner without waiting for acknowledgement, and Sam allowed himself a small sigh. Ambassador Harrison Webb occupied the most luxurious quarters on Horizon Station, a suite designed to impress visiting dignitaries with the wealth and sophistication of Earth's diplomatic corps. Sam had been inside those quarters 17 times in the past year, fixing everything from climate control to the ambassador's personal espresso machine. Webb had never once looked at him directly, addressing his complaints to the air as if maintenance requests were handled by particularly competent ghosts. Sam gathered his tools and made his way toward the ambassador's quarters, passing through security checkpoints that scanned his credentials without the guards bothering to look up. The station's corridors grew more elegant as he approached the diplomatic section, utilitarian metal giving way to polished surfaces and subtle lighting designed to create an atmosphere of importance. Flags from every allied world hung at precise intervals, their colors muted and dignified against the white walls. He reached the ambassador's door and pressed the service chime, waiting the required 30 seconds before using his maintenance override. The quarters were empty, which was normal for this time of day. Webb would be in meetings, preparing for the arrival of the Valdorian delegation, rehearsing the careful diplomatic dances that powerful people performed with each other while the invisible workers kept their world running smoothly. The bathroom issue was minor, a pressure regulator that had drifted slightly out of calibration. Sam fixed it in under 10 minutes, his hands moving with the automatic precision of long practice. He was replacing the access panel when he heard the main door open, followed by voices in urgent conversation. Instinct made him freeze. Experience made him silent. He was behind the bathroom door, technically visible if anyone looked, but people rarely looked at maintenance workers even when they were standing in plain sight. The voices grew clearer as footsteps approached. Ambassador Webb's cultured baritone carried the strain of controlled anxiety. The timeline has accelerated. The Queen arrives in 3 hours instead of 6. Something about security concerns on the Valdorian side. A second voice, unfamiliar to Sam, responded with cold precision. That complicates matters. The original plan required more preparation time. Sam's chest tightened. There was something in the second voice, a quality of calculation that triggered old instincts he had not used in decades. He had heard voices like that before, in desert camps where men discussed operations with the detached efficiency of butchers planning their cuts. Webb's response was too quiet to hear clearly, but the second voice cut through with crystalline clarity. We proceed regardless. The window cannot be moved. You understand what happens if we fail. Footsteps receded. A door closed. Sam remained motionless for another 60 seconds before allowing himself to breathe. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his hands had begun to shake in the old familiar way that meant danger was close but not yet upon him. He told himself he had misheard. He told himself that diplomatic conversations often sounded ominous to outsiders who lacked context. He told himself that a 68-year-old maintenance worker had no business imagining conspiracies in the casual conversations of important people. He did not believe himself. Sam finished replacing the access panel and left the ambassador's quarters through the service entrance, his mind churning with questions he had no way to answer. The corridor outside was even more chaotic than before, staff members practically running as they prepared for the accelerated arrival of the Valdorian delegation. Sam pressed himself against the wall to avoid being trampled, watching the controlled panic with the detached perspective of someone who existed outside the hierarchy of urgency. His personal communicator buzzed against his hip, a rare occurrence. Maintenance workers did not receive urgent messages. He pulled out the device and frowned at the screen, which displayed only a string of coordinates and a timestamp. The observation deck on level 12, 45 minutes from now. No sender identification. No explanation, just coordinates and a time, sent through channels that should not have been able to reach his personal device at all. Sam deleted the message and continued toward his quarters, telling himself he would ignore it. He had 43 years of experience in not getting involved in things that were not his business. He had survived war and loss and the slow grinding invisibility of age by keeping his head down and his hands busy. Whatever game was being played in the upper levels of Horizon Station, it had nothing to do with Samuel Mercer. 42 minutes later, he stood on the observation deck of level 12, staring out at the stars and wondering what exactly had compelled him to come. The observation deck was empty at this hour, most of the station's population focused on the preparations below. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Sam could see the curve of Earth hanging in the darkness, blue and white and impossibly beautiful. He had been born in Ohio, raised in a small house with a yard where his father grew tomatoes. He had never imagined, as a child watching Apollo launches on a black and white television, that he would one day look down at his planet from the stars. The window reflected movement behind him, and Sam turned to find himself facing a holographic projection that flickered slightly at the edges. The figure was male, middle-aged, wearing a military uniform that Sam recognized immediately because he had seen it every day for 3 years of his life. The face was older than he remembered, lined with years that should not have passed, but unmistakably familiar. Sam's voice emerged as barely a whisper. "Robert?" The hologram smiled, and Sam felt his knees weaken because that smile was exactly right. The slightly crooked expression that Robert Haynes had worn whenever he was about to explain something that Sam would not want to hear. The projection's voice carried the warm authority that Sam remembered from 100 mission briefings. "Hello, Sam. It's been a long time." Sam's throat tightened around words that did not want to come. Robert Haynes had been his commanding officer during the Gulf War, the man who had taught him that medicine was just another form of combat and that keeping someone alive was the most important victory a soldier could win. Robert Haynes had also been dead for 30 years, killed in what the official reports described as a shuttle accident during a classified diplomatic mission. The hologram continued without waiting for a response. "I know this is confusing. I know you have questions, but there isn't time to answer them right now. You need to listen carefully, Sam, because tonight someone is going to die on this station, and you're the only one who can prevent it." Sam's hands were shaking again, but his voice came out steady. "You're dead. I attended your memorial service. I held your wife's hand while she cried." The hologram's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. "I died 30 years ago, yes. But before I died, I made arrangements, contingencies. I knew this day would come eventually, and I knew they would need someone they could trust. They need you, Sam." The observation deck suddenly felt very cold. Sam's mind raced through possibilities, trying to find a rational explanation that did not involve ghosts or conspiracies or the resurrection of men who had been dead for 3 decades. The hologram watched him with patient understanding, allowing him time to process what should have been impossible. Sam's voice cracked slightly on the question. "Who needs me? What are you talking about?" The hologram leaned closer, its edges blurring slightly with the movement. "The Queen, Alindra. She's in danger, Sam. There are forces on both sides, human and Valdorian, who don't want peace between our species. Tonight's wedding is supposed to be a symbol of unity, but instead, it's going to be a massacre unless someone intervenes." Sam felt the words like physical blows, each one landing with terrible precision. He was a maintenance worker. He fixed toilets and air filters and the occasional espresso machine. He was not equipped for conspiracies and assassinations and the fate of interstellar relations. His response came out harsher than he intended. "Why me? I'm nobody. I'm the guy they don't even bother to learn the name of. Find someone who matters." The hologram's smile returned, sadder this time. "That's exactly why it has to be you. They're watching everyone who matters. Everyone with power, with influence, with something to gain or lose. But you, Sam, you're invisible. You can go places they're not watching. You can see things they're not expecting anyone to see." The logic was terrible and perfect. Sam understood it immediately because he had spent 3 years being overlooked by everyone from ambassadors to security guards. His invisibility was not a curse. It was a weapon he had never thought to use. The hologram began to fade, its edges dissolving into static. "I can't maintain this connection much longer. The encryption is degrading, but I'll send you information when I can. Trust your instincts, Sam. Trust what you learned in the desert. And when the time comes, trust her." Sam's voice rose with desperation. "Trust who? Robert? Wait." But the hologram was gone, leaving only the stars and the silence and the weight of impossible responsibilities settling across Sam's shoulders like a shroud. He stood there for a long time, watching Earth turn slowly in the darkness, trying to convince himself that he had imagined the entire encounter. The rational explanation was obvious. Stress, isolation, the particular madness that came from spending too much time in maintenance shafts with only his memories for company. Robert Haynes was dead. Holograms did not appear from nowhere with warnings about assassination plots. Samuel Mercer was a maintenance worker, not a hero. His communicator buzzed again, and he looked down at a message that made his blood run cold. Security alert. Ambassador Webb has collapsed. Medical emergency in Reception Hall 7. All available personnel report immediately. Sam was running before he finished reading. The reception hall was chaos when he arrived. Dignitaries pressed against the walls, while medical staff crowded around a figure on the floor. Sam pushed through the crowd with the authority that came from decades of emergency response. His maintenance coveralls earning him suspicious looks, but not active resistance. People in uniforms were supposed to be somewhere during a crisis, even if nobody was quite sure where. He reached the inner circle and saw Ambassador Webb convulsing on the polished floor, foam flecking his lips, his eyes rolled back to show only whites. The medical staff were competent, but clearly overwhelmed, their equipment designed for routine diplomatic ailments rather than whatever was destroying Webb's body from the inside. Sam's hands moved before his mind caught up, muscle memory from 1,000 emergencies taking control. He dropped to his knees beside the ambassador, his fingers finding the pulse point at Webb's throat while his eyes cataloged symptoms with automatic precision. Rapid heartbeat, constricted pupils, the particular gray pallor that indicated oxygen deprivation at the cellular level. His voice cut through the panic with the calm authority he had learned in combat medic training. He's been poisoned. I need epinephrine and activated charcoal now. Someone get me a neural stabilizer. The medical staff stared at him for a frozen moment, seeing only a maintenance worker in dirty coveralls giving orders above his station. Then one of them, a young woman with intelligent eyes, nodded sharply and began assembling the requested supplies. Sam worked with desperate efficiency, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. Webb's convulsions slowed as the medications took effect, his breathing stabilizing into something approaching normal rhythm. The ambassador's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused, but alive. A voice from behind Sam carried the sharp edge of authority. "Who are you? What is your authorization for this intervention?" Sam turned to find Lieutenant Valdos staring at him with an expression that mixed suspicion with grudging respect. Behind her, a cluster of officials watched with varying degrees of alarm and curiosity. Sam kept his voice level. Samuel Mercer, Maintenance Technician 3rd Class, former combat medic, 1st Infantry Division, Gulf War. The ambassador was dying. I stopped that from happening. Valdos's eyes narrowed, processing this information against whatever assumptions she had made about the old man who fixed toilets. Before she could respond, a new commotion rippled through the crowd, and Sam looked up to see staff members pressing against the windows that overlooked the main docking bay. The Valdorian delegation had arrived. The ship that settled into the docking cradle was unlike anything Sam had ever seen. A vessel that seemed grown rather than built, its hull shifting with colors that had no names in any human language. Lights rippled across its surface in patterns that suggested communication, or perhaps simply beauty, and Sam felt his breath catch at the sheer alienness of it. The delegation emerged in formal procession, beings whose appearance challenged human assumptions about the possible shapes of intelligence. But Sam's attention fixed immediately on the figure at the center of the group, the one around whom all others seemed to orbit like planets around a particularly magnificent sun. Queen Alindra of the Valdorian Federation stood perhaps 6 feet tall, her form humanoid but unmistakably other. Her skin seemed to glow from within, a soft silver luminescence that made the station's artificial lighting feel crude by comparison. Her eyes were the color of starfire, burning with ancient intelligence and something else that Sam could not immediately identify. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent centuries learning how to carry the weight of power without being crushed by it. Beside her floated Nova, and Sam understood immediately why the guardian creature had earned its name. Nova was not quite solid, not quite light, a being that existed somewhere between energy and matter. It pulsed with gentle radiance as it circled its queen, and Sam sensed rather than saw the protective attention it directed at everything in Alindra's vicinity. The reception line formed with practiced efficiency, dignitaries arranging themselves in order of diplomatic precedence. Sam should have retreated to the background where he belonged, should have faded back into the comfortable invisibility that had protected him for so long. Instead, he found himself standing near the front of the crowd, still wearing his maintenance coveralls, still smelling of machine oil and recycled air. A protocol officer noticed him and moved to intervene, her expression horrified at this breach of diplomatic order. But before she could reach him, a new crisis erupted at the head of the reception line. Ambassador Webb, despite barely surviving his poisoning, had insisted on resuming his duties. He now stood swaying at the front of the human delegation, his face gray and sheened with sweat, clearly on the verge of collapse. The protocol officer's attention shifted to this more pressing emergency, leaving Sam momentarily forgotten. He watched as Webb tried to speak, his words slurring and indistinct. The Valdorian delegation exchanged glances that Sam could not read, but that clearly indicated concern or perhaps contempt. What happened next would be debated in diplomatic circles for years. Webb's legs buckled, and he pitched forward directly into the path of the Valdorian queen. Security personnel from both species lunged to intervene, weapons appearing from concealed locations. The moment balanced on a knife's edge of potential catastrophe. Sam moved without thinking, his body remembering the training that his mind had tried to forget. He caught Webb before the ambassador hit the ground, redirecting his fall away from the queen with a practiced pivot that had saved lives on battlefields 30 years ago. The motion was smooth and unremarkable, the kind of intervention that most observers would barely register. But Queen Alindra registered it, her starfire eyes fixed on Sam with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously examined and exposed. Nova drifted closer, its radiance brightening as it studied this strange human who had placed himself between its queen and potential danger. The moment stretched into uncomfortable silence. Then Alindra spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords could not produce. "You moved to protect me before your own ambassador." Sam's response came out before he could consider its diplomatic implications. "With respect, Your Majesty, he was falling toward you," seemed like the thing to do. A murmur rippled through the assembled dignitaries, shock at the casual familiarity of his tone. Protocol demanded elaborate courtesies, careful genuflections, language weighted with centuries of diplomatic tradition. Sam had offered none of these things. Alindra's expression shifted in ways that Owen could not interpret. Then, impossibly, she laughed. The sound was brief and bright, a flash of genuine amusement that seemed to startle her attendants as much as it startled Sam. Nova pulsed with surprised warmth, its light taking on golden undertones that Sam had not seen before. The Queen's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. "You do not fear me." Sam felt the weight of attention from every being in the reception hall. His coveralls were stained with Ambassador Webb's sweat. His knees ached from kneeling on the deck. His hands still trembled, slightly from the adrenaline of the medical emergency. He should have been terrified, or at least appropriately intimidated. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "Your Majesty, I'm 68 years old. I've feared enough things in my life. Doesn't seem like there's much point in adding to the list now." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her ancient eyes seeing something that Sam himself could not identify. Then she turned to her attendants and spoke in a language that Sam's translator rendered as formal Valdorian. "This one interests me. See that he is included in the evening ceremonies." The protocol officer's expression suggested that this was highly irregular, possibly unprecedented. Sam's expression suggested that he had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. Nova drifted closer still, its radiance brushing against Sam's skin like warm sunlight. The sensation was pleasant and strange, a touch that existed somewhere between physical and emotional. Sam held very still, uncertain what was expected of him. The Queen's voice carried quiet wonder. "Nova has never approached a stranger willingly. Not in the 200 years since its bonding with my house." Sam looked at the beautiful, impossible creature floating before him and felt something shift in his chest. Nova's light seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, a synchronization that felt significant in ways he could not explain. His voice came out softer than he intended. "Maybe it knows I'm not a threat." Alindra's expression was unreadable as she responded, "Nova does not sense threats. It senses truth. It senses the quality of a being's spirit." She paused, her starfire eyes holding his. "It senses sincerity without calculation." In 3 centuries of my reign, I have encountered perhaps a dozen beings who possess that quality. The reception continued around them, diplomats resuming their careful dances, but Sam felt as though he and the Queen existed in a separate bubble of time. Nova continued to circle them both, its light weaving patterns that might have been communication or might have been simply joy. The evening that followed passed in a blur of events that Sam would later struggle to reconstruct. He was given quarters far above his station, clothes that fit better than anything he had worn in years, in a place at the edge of the wedding ceremony that allowed him to observe without participating. The crystal halls of Horizon Station had been transformed for the occasion, their utilitarian surfaces hidden beneath living flowers that had been grown in Valdorian gardens and transported across light years for this single night. The wedding itself was beautiful in ways that human language could not adequately capture. Princess Lyria and Prince Theron exchanged vows in a ceremony that wove together traditions from both their cultures, their words resonating through the hall with harmonic frequencies that made Sam's bones hum in sympathy. The assembled guests watched with expressions that ranged from genuine emotion to careful diplomatic interest, each one calculating the implications of this union for their own species and interests. Sam watched the Queen. Alindra sat on a raised dais overlooking the ceremony, her posture perfect, her expression serene. But Sam had spent 47 years learning to read the truth behind people's masks, and he saw the loneliness that lived in her ancient eyes. She was surrounded by power and beauty and the attention of hundreds of dignitaries, yet she was utterly alone. The isolation of her position had crystallized around her like armor, protecting her from connection as thoroughly as it protected her from harm. Nova floated beside her, its light dimmed to respectful levels during the ceremony. Occasionally, it would drift towards Sam's position at the edge of the hall, its radiance brightening briefly before returning to its station beside the Queen. Sam began to understand that the creature was checking on him, ensuring that he had not left. The memory surfaced without warning, sharp and painful as broken glass. Margaret, his wife of 37 years, standing in their small apartment in Houston, wearing the blue dress she had bought for their daughter, Sarah's wedding. The dress had cost more than they could really afford, but Margaret had insisted because Sarah deserved a mother who looked beautiful on her special day. Sam had taken Margaret's hand and led her to the center of their living room, where they had danced to music playing from a radio older than their marriage. She had been diagnosed 6 months later, gone 18 months after that. Sam had not danced since. The ceremony concluded with a burst of light and sound that pulled Sam from his memories. The newly married couple descended from the ceremonial platform, their joy evident even to observers unfamiliar with either species' emotional expressions. The crowd began to migrate toward the reception hall, where celebration would continue until the station's artificial dawn. Sam was preparing to slip away to his temporary quarters when a presence materialized beside him with silent grace. Queen Alindra stood close enough that he could see the subtle patterns of light that moved beneath her, her glow, close enough that Nova's radiance washed over him like gentle warmth. Her voice was quieter than before, stripped of the formal harmonics she had used in public. "You have been watching me all evening." Sam felt heat rise to his cheeks, an embarrassment he had thought himself too old to experience. "I apologize, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to." She cut him off with a gesture that was somehow both imperious and gentle. "Do not apologize. It has been a very long time since anyone watched me as a person rather than a symbol." The honesty in her voice struck Sam like a physical blow. He understood that loneliness, the particular isolation of being seen for what you represented rather than who you were. He had felt it every day since Margaret's death, every moment of invisibility on this station where nobody bothered to learn his name. The Queen continued, her gaze holding his. "You are the only being in this hall who has looked at me without wanting something. No political advantage, no economic consideration, no fear or worship or calculation." She paused, and Sam thought he saw vulnerability flicker across her ancient features. "Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" Sam's response came from somewhere deep and honest. "With respect, Your Majesty, I think everyone wants something. I'm just not sure yet what I want from you." Her laugh was softer this time, more private, but it carried the same genuine warmth as before. Honesty as well. You are a remarkable creature, Samuel Mercer. The use of his full name startled him. He had not told her his name. He started to ask how she knew, but she was already speaking again. You saved your ambassador's life today with skills you have not used in decades. You inserted yourself between me and potential danger without hesitation. You have spent this entire evening watching me with concern rather than calculation. Her head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed curious rather than threatening. What are you, Samuel Mercer, that you hide yourself among those who fix broken things? The question cut deeper than she could have known. Sam had been asking himself the same question for years, ever since the invisibility of age had settled over him like a shroud. What was he, now that the wars were over and the patients were healed and his wife was gone? What remained of the man who had once been valued for more than his ability to repair malfunctioning equipment? His voice came out rougher than he intended. I'm just someone who learned a long time ago that the most important work usually happens where nobody's watching. The Queen's expression shifted into something that might have been understanding. In my culture, we have a saying, the stars that burn brightest are not always the ones that guide ships home. Sometimes the smallest light is the one that matters most. Before Sam could respond, music began to fill the reception hall, harmonies that seemed to exist in frequencies beyond human hearing. The assembled guests began to move toward the dance floor, pairs forming according to protocols that Sam did not understand. Alindra extended her hand, a gesture that crossed species boundaries with elegant simplicity. Dance with me, Samuel Mercer. Sam stared at her hand, his mind flooding with objections. He was a maintenance worker. She was a queen. He had not danced since his wife's death. He would surely embarrass both of them. The entire diplomatic corps was watching. This was inappropriate, impossible, insane. His hand reached out anyway. Her skin was cool and smooth, like touching moonlight made solid. Nova circled them both as they moved toward the dance floor, its radiance creating a gentle halo that separated them from the surrounding crowd. Sam was acutely aware of every eye in the hall tracking their movement, every whispered comment about the human maintenance worker dancing with the Valdorian queen. Sam's voice carried embarrassed honesty. I should warn you, Your Majesty, the last time I danced was at my daughter's wedding, and I stepped on the bride's feet. Alindra's response carried warm amusement. Then we shall go slowly, and you may step on my feet as needed. They have endured worse than the attention of an honest man. They began to move together, and Sam discovered that the queen was a patient teacher. She guided him through unfamiliar steps with subtle pressure from her hands, never making him feel foolish for his mistakes. The music seemed to wrap around them, creating a private space within the crowded hall. Sam found his rhythm gradually, muscle memory from decades past combining with the Queen's expert guidance. The tension in his shoulders began to ease. His movements became less mechanical, more natural. For the first time in years, he felt something that might have been joy stirring in his chest. Alindra's voice was soft, meant only for him. You are thinking of someone you have lost. Sam's step faltered, but she steadied him with gentle pressure. My wife, Margaret. She taught me to dance a long time ago. She was the one who could always make me laugh, even when everything was terrible. The Queen's expression carried ancient understanding. I too have lost someone who made the darkness bearable. My husband, KL. He fell in battle 50 years ago, defending our people from an enemy that no longer exists. Her voice dropped lower still. I have not laughed since his death, not until today. The admission hung between them, fragile and precious. Sam understood what it cost her to share such vulnerability, understood because he had spent 6 years building walls around his own grief. His response was simple and honest. Your Majesty, I think laughter is probably something worth rediscovering, even when it hurts. She smiled at him then, and it transformed her face from regal distance into something approaching warmth. Perhaps you are right, Samuel Mercer. Perhaps it is time to remember how to feel things other than duty and loss. The music swelled around them, and for a single perfect moment, Sam forgot that he was invisible and unimportant. He forgot the mysterious message from his dead commander. He forgot the conspiracy lurking in the shadows of Horizon Station. He forgot everything except the cool touch of her hands, the silver glow of her skin, the starfire warmth of her eyes. Then the lights went out. The explosion hit a fraction of a second later, a concussive wave that threw Sam and the Queen apart. He hit the ground hard, his old bones protesting the impact, and rolled instinctively toward where he had last seen Alindra. Emergency lighting flickered on, painting the hall in harsh red shadows. Screams echoed from every direction. Nova blazed with defensive radiance, positioning itself between the Queen and the surrounding chaos. Sam's combat training took over, assessing threats and injuries with automatic precision. The explosion had originated near the main entrance, structural damage visible but not catastrophic. Casualties were scattered across the dance floor, some moving, some ominously still. He found Alindra crouched behind an overturned table, her luminescent form dimmed with shock but apparently uninjured. Nova hovered protectively above her, its light casting harsh shadows across her face. Sam's voice came out in the calm tones of emergency response. "Your Majesty, are you hurt?" Her eyes met his, ancient and frightened and somehow grateful. "No, thanks to you. You pushed me aside just before—" She trailed off as new sounds cut through the chaos. Security personnel from both species were converging on a point near the center of the hall, their weapons drawn, their voices raised in urgent communication. Sam helped the Queen to her feet and moved toward the commotion, Nova following close behind. He saw the body before he understood what he was seeing. Ambassador Harrison Webb lay on the polished floor, a Valdorian ceremonial dagger protruding from his chest. His eyes were open and empty, whatever secrets he had carried now lost forever. Around him, a ring of security officers maintained careful distance, their expressions grim. Prince Malachar, the Queen's brother and commander of the Valdorian military forces, stood at the edge of the circle. His posture radiated controlled fury, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the shocked silence of the hall with terrible clarity. His finger pointed directly at Sam as the accusation rang out like a death sentence. This human was seen fleeing the ambassador's location moments before the explosion. He had access to Valdorian ceremonial weapons through his maintenance work. He has been manipulating his way into close proximity with my sister all evening. Sam felt the blood drain from his face as guards from both species turned toward him, weapons raised. Malachar's voice dripped with cold certainty. This man has assassinated his own ambassador as the first step in a plot against the Valdorian crown. Seize him. Sam looked at the Queen, hoping for intervention, for belief, for anything that might save him from the impossible accusation. Her starfire eyes held his, filled with something he could not read. Nova's light flickered between them, uncertain, and Sam realized with terrible clarity that the evening had only just begun to fall apart. The detention cell on Horizon Station had been designed for diplomatic incidents, not actual criminals. The walls were a soothing neutral gray, the bed reasonably comfortable, the sanitary facilities private and functional. Sam had spent time in far worse accommodations during his years of service, places where the walls sweated moisture and the air tasted of desperation. This cell felt more like a hotel room with locked doors, which somehow made the situation feel more surreal rather than less. Valdorian guards had escorted him here with weapons drawn, their luminescent skin pulsing with colors that Sam interpreted as hostility. Lieutenant Kira Valdos had walked behind them, her expression carved from stone, her eyes burning with the particular contempt she reserved for those who had disappointed her expectations. She had not spoken to him during the transit from the reception hall, but her silence communicated more than words could have managed. The cell door sealed behind him with a soft hiss, and Sam found himself alone with the weight of impossible accusations. Ambassador Webb was dead. Someone had planted evidence pointing towards Sam. The fragile peace between Earth and the Valdorian Federation hung by threads that grew thinner with each passing moment. He sat on the edge of the bed and examined his hands, the same hands that had saved Webb's life hours earlier, the same hands that had held the Queen during their dance. They were steady now, the trembling of adrenaline faded into the familiar calm that always followed crisis. His mind, however, refused to settle. The conspiracy Robert had warned him about was real. The assassination attempt had succeeded, though the target had been human rather than Valdorian. Sam turned the puzzle pieces over in his thoughts, trying to find patterns that made sense. Webb had been poisoned twice in one day, first to remove him from the reception line, then fatally while attention was focused on the explosion. The killer had access to both human technology and Valdorian weapons. The frame job required knowledge of Sam's movements throughout the evening. Someone had planned this carefully. Someone who understood both species well enough to manipulate events from the shadows. Someone who wanted war. Time passed in the peculiar way that time passes in cells, stretching and compressing without reference to external events. Sam had nearly drifted into an exhausted half-sleep when the door chimed and slid open to reveal a sight that made him snap immediately alert. Queen Alindra stood in the doorway, her silver radiance dimmed but unmistakable. Behind her, Nova pulsed with agitated light, its patterns suggesting protective concern. Two Valdorian guards flanked her, their postures rigid with disapproval. Her voice carried the formal harmonics of official pronouncement. By the authority vested in the crown of the Valdorian Federation, I claim jurisdiction over this prisoner. He will be remanded to my personal custody pending a full investigation. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to object, but uncertain of the protocols involved. The Queen's word was law within Valdorian space, but Horizon Station existed in a complex jurisdictional gray zone. Before the guard could formulate a response, footsteps echoed in the corridor behind them. Prince Malachar emerged from the shadows, his expression thunderous. His military uniform gleamed with decorations earned in campaigns that Sam could not identify, and his bearing radiated the particular arrogance of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. His voice dripped with barely controlled fury. "Sister, you cannot be serious. This human murdered his own ambassador in an attempt to destabilize our alliance. He should be interrogated, not coddled." Alindra did not turn to face her brother, but her response carried steel beneath silk. Nova approached him willingly. In 2 centuries, Nova has never been wrong about the quality of a being's spirit. I will not condemn a man based on circumstantial evidence while ignoring the judgment of a creature who has protected our family since before you were born. While Malachar's skin flushed with colors that Sam read as rage. You trust an energy construct over your own blood? Over the evidence of your own eyes? The Queen finally turned, and Sam saw something in her starfire eyes that made him understand why she had ruled for 3 centuries. Her voice dropped to a register that vibrated with ancient power. I trust wisdom over anger. I trust patience over haste. And I trust my own judgment, which has kept our people safe through challenges you cannot imagine. She paused, and her tone softened slightly. Brother, I understand your concern. But rushing to judgment serves only those who wish us harm. Give me time to uncover the truth. The tension between them crackled like electricity, 2 wills colliding in the narrow corridor. Sam held his breath, acutely aware that his fate hung on the outcome of this sibling confrontation. Malachar's expression shifted through emotions too complex for Sam to interpret. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less intense. You have 12 hours. If you cannot prove his innocence by then, he will face Valdorian justice. He turned on his heel and stalked away, his guards falling into formation behind him. Alindra watched him go, and Sam thought he saw grief flicker across her features before she composed herself. She turned to face him, and the formal mask had slipped slightly, revealing the exhaustion beneath. Her voice was softer now, meant only for him. Come with me. We have much to discuss and very little time. Sam rose from the bed and followed her into the corridor, Nova drifting between them like a luminous chaperone. The guards maintained a respectful distance as they walked through passages that grew increasingly elegant, moving from the utilitarian detention level toward what Sam suspected were the Queen's personal quarters. The suite they entered made Ambassador Webb's luxurious accommodations look like a maintenance closet. Living crystal grew from the walls in patterns that suggested organic architecture, their surfaces shifting with colors that responded to the Queen's presence. Furniture that appeared grown rather than built occupied spaces designed for both human and Valdorian physiology. Windows looked out on the starfield, Earth hanging in the distance like a blue marble suspended in darkness. Alindra dismissed her remaining attendants with a gesture, and for the first time since they had met, Sam found himself truly alone with the most powerful being he had ever encountered. Nova settled into a corner, its radiance dimming to provide privacy while remaining vigilant. The queen moved to a crystalline cabinet and withdrew 2 glasses filled with pale liquid. She offered one to Sam, her expression unreadable. Sam accepted the glass but did not drink, his combat medic training asserting itself. No offense intended, Your Majesty, but given the evening's events, I'm being careful about what I consume. Her laugh surprised him, brief and genuine. A wise precaution, though I assure you if I wanted you dead, I would not need poison. She took a sip from her own glass to demonstrate its safety. It is simply water, filtered through Valdorian crystals. Some humans find the mineral content refreshing. Sam tasted the water cautiously. It was cool and clean, with undertones he could not identify but found pleasant. He drained the glass and set it aside, feeling marginally more human. The queen settled into a chair that seemed to reshape itself to accommodate her, gesturing for Sam to take a seat opposite. The formality of their earlier interactions had faded, replaced by something that felt almost like the beginning of trust. Her voice carried quiet intensity. Tell me what you know. Tell me everything, including the parts you think I will not believe. Sam considered lying, considered protecting sources and maintaining operational security. But Nova pulsed gently in its corner, and he remembered what the queen had said about the creature's ability to sense truth. Deception would serve neither of them now. He started at the beginning with the message that had appeared on his communicator, directing him to the observation deck. He described the holographic projection of Robert Haynes, the warning about assassination plots, the impossible claim that a man dead for 30 years was somehow still communicating. He told her about the conversation he had overheard in Webb's quarters, about the second voice that had spoken of timelines and consequences. He laid out every piece of the puzzle he had collected, including the pieces that did not yet fit. Alindra listened without interruption, her starfire eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, processing information that challenged comfortable assumptions about the nature of death and communication. Her response when it came surprised him. Robert Haynes. I knew him. Sam's chest tightened with sudden intensity. You knew Robert? The queen rose from her chair and moved to the window, her silver radiance reflected in the transparent surface. He was among the first humans to make contact with our people 30 years ago. A diplomat by necessity rather than training, but possessed of a sincerity that our sensors confirmed was genuine. She paused, her voice growing distant. He discovered something during his time with us, something that frightened him. He spoke to me privately, warning of forces within both our governments that did not want peace. Sam felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. What happened to him? The queen's reflection showed an expression of old grief. He was recalled to Earth suddenly. 3 weeks later, we received word that he had died in a shuttle accident. I mourned him, though we had known each other only briefly. He was one of the few humans who saw us as people rather than opportunities. The parallel to her earlier words about Sam was not lost on either of them. The queen turned from the window, and Sam saw tears glistening in her starfire eyes, tears that she did not bother to hide. Her voice cracked slightly with old pain. You asked earlier what I lost. My husband, Kyle. He died 50 years ago in a war that should never have been fought. But Robert's death, that felt different. That felt like murder dressed in accident's clothing. Sam rose from his chair, driven by an instinct older than thought. He crossed the space between them and stood close, not touching, but present. His voice was rough with shared understanding. My wife Margaret died 6 years ago. Cancer. Nothing sudden, nothing dramatic. Just a slow fading, day by day, until the woman I loved was gone and I was left holding her hand in an empty room. The queen's tears fell freely now, silver tracks on silver skin. Her voice emerged as barely a whisper. 3 centuries I have lived. 3 centuries of duty and responsibility and the weight of 47 worlds. And in all that time, I have felt more alone than I feel in this moment, standing with a human maintenance worker who understands loss. Sam reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw, and took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, exactly as it had been during their dance. But this touch felt different. This was not performance or diplomacy. This was 2 broken people finding unexpected connection in the dark. His words came from somewhere deep and true. I spent 6 years being invisible. People looked through me like I wasn't there. I fixed their toilets and their air filters, and they never bothered to learn my name. I thought that was just what happened when you got old, when the world decided you didn't matter anymore. The Queen's hand tightened in his. And now? Sam met her starfire eyes directly. Now I'm standing in the personal quarters of an alien queen who has lived 3 times longer than my entire species has been flying. And somehow, impossibly, she sees me. She sees a 68-year-old man from Ohio who spent his life trying to be useful without being noticed. His voice dropped lower. You live 300 years and you're lonely. I live 68 years and I'm lonely too. Maybe time isn't what matters. Maybe what matters is having someone who actually looks at you. Nova's radiance shifted, warming to golden tones that washed over them both. The creature drifted closer, its light encompassing both the Queen and Sam in a gentle embrace. Alindra gasped softly, and Sam understood from her reaction that this was unprecedented, that Nova had never included an outsider in its protective warmth. The moment stretched, fragile and precious. Then the Queen straightened, composing herself with the discipline of centuries, though she did not release his hand. Her voice carried new resolve. We must find the truth, for Robert, for Webb, for the peace that so many have died trying to build. She paused, her grip tightening. And for us, for whatever this is that we have found in each other. Sam nodded, his mind already shifting to the practical challenges ahead. He had evidence to gather, connections to trace, conspiracies to unravel. But first, he needed to examine something that had been nagging at him since the explosion. His tone became businesslike. When I was treating Webb the first time, before the reception, I took a blood sample, standard procedure for unknown toxins. If I can analyze it properly, compare it to whatever killed him the second time. Alindra's expression sharpened with interest. You have medical analysis equipment in your quarters? Sam allowed himself a small smile. I have a maintenance toolkit that includes diagnostic equipment. It's meant for identifying contaminants in air filtration systems, but chemistry is chemistry. The real question is whether I can get to my quarters without being arrested again. The Queen's smile matched his own. You are in my custody. Where you go with my authority. She released his hand and moved toward a communication panel. I will arrange for your equipment to be brought here. In the meantime, there is something I must show you. She led him to a smaller chamber adjoining the main suite, a space that appeared to serve as a private office. Crystalline screens displayed information in Valdorian script that Sam could not read, but the Queen manipulated the interface with practiced ease, calling up images and documents that told a story of their own. Her voice took on the cadence of briefing. 3 months ago, our intelligence services detected unusual communications between certain elements of the Valdorian military and unidentified parties within the Earth government. The content was encrypted beyond our ability to break, but the pattern suggested coordination rather than negotiation. Sam studied the displayed information, picking out what patterns he could. Someone on both sides working together, against the Alliance. The Queen nodded grimly. My brother Malachar has been restless. He believes that I have been too accommodating toward humanity, that our alliance shows weakness rather than strength. He has supporters among the military who share his views. She paused, her expression troubled. But I did not believe he would go so far as assassination. He is impulsive and proud, but he is still my brother. Sam considered the implications carefully. The explosion, the murder, the frame job against me. If Malachar wanted to start a war, this would be an effective way to do it. Kill a human ambassador with a Valdorian weapon, blame a convenient scapegoat, watch diplomatic relations collapse. The Queen's response was quiet but firm. And yet I cannot believe he would act alone. Malachar is a soldier, not a schemer. Someone is manipulating him, using his anger and his pride to further their own agenda. Before Sam could respond, his communicator buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and felt ice form in his chest. The message was from Robert Haynes. Webb was not the target, he was a distraction. The real goal is the Queen herself. You must protect her, Sam. Trust no one from either government. The corruption runs deeper than you can imagine. Look to the shadows of the royal house. The dead do not always stay buried. Sam showed the message to Elindra, watching her face cycle through emotions he could not name. When she spoke, her voice was steady but strained. If what this says is true, then my brother's coup attempt is merely the surface of something far more dangerous. Sam's response came with the certainty of a battlefield instinct. Then we need to find out now who's really pulling the strings, and we need to do it before they make their next move. A knock at the door interrupted them. A Valdorian attendant entered carrying Sam's maintenance toolkit, retrieved from his quarters as the Queen had arranged. Sam accepted the equipment with grateful efficiency and immediately began setting up his improvised analysis station. The blood sample he had taken from Webb was still sealed in its collection vial, preserved by the standard protocols he had followed automatically during the emergency. Sam connected his diagnostic equipment and began the slow process of chemical analysis, using techniques he had learned decades ago and refined through years of practical application. Elindra watched with fascination as he worked, her technical understanding clearly limited, but her appreciation for his competence evident. Nova drifted closer, its radiance providing additional illumination as Sam squinted at readouts and adjusted parameters. The first results confirmed what Sam had suspected. Webb had been poisoned before he was stabbed. The toxin was sophisticated, designed to cause cardiac failure within a specific time frame. The knife wound had been almost superfluous, a dramatic flourish meant to create a visual story that would overshadow the chemical evidence. Sam's voice carried grim satisfaction. Someone wanted Webb dead and wanted it to look like a Valdorian attack. The poison did the real work. The ceremonial dagger was just theater. Elindra leaned closer to examine the readouts. Can you identify the poison? Determine its origin? Sam ran additional analyses, his frown deepening with each result. The toxin's chemical signature was unfamiliar, neither purely human nor purely Valdorian in composition. It appeared to be a hybrid, something engineered from components of both biochemistries. His voice dropped to a troubled murmur. This wasn't made by one side or the other. This was made by someone who had access to both. Someone who understood Valdorian and human biology well enough to create a poison that would work on either species. The implications settled over them like a shroud. The conspiracy they faced was not human versus Valdorian, but something that transcended species boundaries entirely. Whatever faction had killed Webb, they had resources and knowledge that suggested deep infiltration of both governments. Sam continued his analysis, searching for any identifying markers that might point toward the poison's creators. He found something unexpected buried in the chemical composition, a trace element that should not have been present in any legitimate pharmaceutical or weapons facility. It was a signature compound used exclusively in manufacturing processes specific to the Valdorian royal house. His voice went cold with the realization. The poison contains elements from your family's personal laboratories. Whoever made this had access to facilities that should be restricted to the highest levels of your government. Elindra's face went pale, her silver luminescence flickering with distress. Only members of the royal bloodline can authorize access to those facilities. Only myself, Malachar, and... She stopped, her expression shifting to something between horror and dawning comprehension. Sam felt the ground shifting beneath his assumptions. And who else? The Queen's voice carried the weight of terrible possibility. My mother, Dowager Queen Seraphis. She abdicated the throne 200 years ago, claiming that age had dulled her appetite for power. She retreated to a private estate on the outer colonies. Elindra's hands trembled visibly. We believe she died 75 years ago. Her estate reported her peaceful passing, but we never recovered her body. At the time, we attributed it to the natural dissolution that sometimes occurs with our kind at great age. Sam's mind raced through the implications. But if she didn't actually die, Elindra's ancient eyes blazed with a mixture of fear and fury. Then she has been watching from the shadows for 75 years, waiting, planning. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My mother never approved of peace with humanity. She believed your species was too young, too violent, too unpredictable. She argued against first contact. She opposed every diplomatic initiative. The Queen's expression hardened, and she was furious when I chose reconciliation over conquest. We argued bitterly before her abdication. I thought she had simply given up. Sam absorbed this information, adding it to the pattern he was building. A supposedly dead queen with access to royal laboratories, connections to both governments, through centuries of accumulated influence, and a burning opposition to everything Alindra had built. The conspiracy suddenly had a face. Before he could respond, movement in the corner of his vision drew his attention. He moved casually toward a decorative crystal formation near the door, his posture suggesting idle curiosity. Then, in a swift motion that belied his age, he plucked a small device from behind the crystal and held it up to the light. His voice carried flat certainty. "We're being monitored. Earth technology, standard intelligence service model. Someone has been listening to everything we've said." Alindra's expression cycled through shock to fury in less than a second. She reached toward the device, but Sam shook his head slightly, a gesture she understood immediately. His voice remained carefully neutral, pitched for the benefit of whoever was listening. "We should continue this discussion in a more secure location. Perhaps the observation deck?" The Queen caught his meaning and played along. "An excellent suggestion. Nova, remain here and guard my quarters." They left together, moving through corridors that felt suddenly hostile, every shadow potentially hiding watchers. Sam led them through a maintenance access point that he knew from years of working the station's infrastructure, emerging in a section of the observation deck that was rarely visited due to its distance from the main viewing areas. Only when they were certain of privacy did Sam allow himself to breathe normally. Alindra's voice shook with controlled rage. "If my mother is truly alive, if she has been orchestrating this conspiracy for decades." Sam's response was measured. "Then Robert Haynes probably discovered her involvement 30 years ago, and she had him killed to protect her secret." The observation deck door slid open before Alindra could respond, and a figure stepped through with weapon drawn and aimed directly at Sam's chest. Lieutenant Kira Valdos advanced slowly, her face a mask of barely controlled emotion. At 33 years old, she carried herself with the hard-won confidence of someone who had survived more than her share of battles. In her free hand, she held a data tablet displaying information that Sam could not read from this distance. Her voice cracked with rage and grief. "Robert Haynes, you knew him. You were with him when he died." Sam raised his hand slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Lieutenant, whatever you think you know." Kira cut him off with a gesture of the weapon. "I found files in your quarters, communications, mission reports, personnel records. Robert Haynes was your commanding officer in the Gulf War. He was recruited into a classified diplomatic program after the conflict, and he was my father." The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow. He looked at Kira's face with new eyes, suddenly seeing the echo of Robert's features in her bone structure, the familiar intensity in her gaze. The timeline made sense now. Robert would have been in his late 20s when she was born, before the war, before the first contact that changed everything. Sam's voice emerged rough with sudden understanding. "You're Robert's daughter. He never mentioned." Kira's weapon did not waver, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "He left when I was 3 years old. My mother told me he died in an accident. I spent 30 years believing that lie." Her voice hardened. "Now I find out you were the last person to see him alive, and somehow, impossibly, someone is sending messages using his identity. You're going to tell me everything you know, or I swear I will kill you where you stand." Alindra stepped forward, placing herself partially between Sam and the weapon. "Lieutenant, I understand your pain, but this man is not your enemy. Whatever happened to your father, Samuel Mercer is trying to help us find the truth." Kira's aim shifted slightly to include the Queen. "Your Majesty, with respect, you've known this man for less than a day. I've spent my entire adult life searching for answers about my father's death. I will have those answers, even if I have to go through you to get them." The standoff stretched, 3 people balanced on the edge of violence. Sam watched Kira's trigger finger, calculating distances and odds with the cold precision of a combat veteran. He could probably disarm her. His reflexes were slower than they had been, but not gone entirely. But any physical confrontation risked harm to Alindra, and that was a risk he was not willing to take. Instead, he chose words. His voice dropped into the calm register he had used with frightened soldiers in the desert. "Lieutenant, Your father saved my life in Iraq, more than once. He was the best commanding officer I ever served under. And when he was recruited into that classified program, I grieved because I knew I'd never see him again." He paused, letting the truth of his words settle. "I didn't know he had a daughter. If I had, I would have found you years ago to tell you what kind of man he was." Kira's weapon lowered slightly, her resolve cracking. "Tell me. Tell me everything." The memories surfaced with painful clarity. Images Sam had buried for decades now demanding to be seen. Desert sands stretching to the horizon. The burning wreckage of an Iraqi convoy. Sam's hands covered in blood that was not his own, working frantically to save a soldier whose name he could not remember. And then the sky splitting open with light that was not natural, not of this earth. Sam's voice took on the distant quality of recitation. February 1991. We were in the desert running medical support for a combat unit that had gotten separated from the main force. We found something, a crash site, but not any aircraft we recognized. The technology was wrong. Beautiful, but wrong. Kira's weapon lowered further, her expression shifting from rage to desperate attention. Sam continued, "Robert was the one who made first contact. There was a survivor in the wreckage, injured but alive. Something not human, but clearly intelligent. Robert approached it like he approached everything, with compassion first and caution second. He rendered aid, established communication, saved its life." Alindra's sharp intake of breath drew Sam's attention. Her voice carried wonder. "The Valdorian scout ship. We lost contact with a survey vessel in that region during that time period. The pilot was recovered eventually, but severely injured. She never spoke clearly about what happened. She said only that a human showed her kindness when she expected death." Sam's voice grew heavier. "After the war, Robert was recruited by people who never identified themselves clearly. Government, military, intelligence, some combination. He told me he was going to be working on something important, something that could change everything. He made me promise to remember him, to keep my eyes open. He said that someday, somehow, he might need my help." Kira's weapon finally dropped to her side, her face crumpling with grief. "And then he died. 3 weeks after his last mission here, just like the Queen said." Sam shook his head slowly. "I don't think he died in an accident. I think he discovered who was really opposing the alliance, and they killed him to protect their secret. And I think he's been waiting 30 years for someone he could trust to finish what he started." The observation deck fell silent as the weight of revelation settled over them. 3 people from different worlds, different generations, different experiences, bound together by the legacy of a dead man who might not be entirely dead after all. Kira holstered her weapon and moved to stand beside Sam, her hostility transformed into something closer to alliance. "My father spent his life trying to build peace between our species. If someone killed him to prevent that, then I want to find them. I want to make them pay." Sam placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension beneath. "Then we work together. Whatever Robert uncovered, whatever got him killed, we're going to bring it into the light." They had barely begun to plan their next move when the station's emergency systems activated with screaming urgency. Red lights bathed the observation deck in bloody illumination. Sirens wailed through corridors designed for diplomatic serenity. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the deck, displaying Prince Malakar's face twisted with righteous fury. His voice thundered through every speaker on the station. "Citizens of the Valdorian Federation and guests of Horizon Station, I speak to you in a time of crisis. My sister, Queen Alindra, has allowed herself to be corrupted by human influences. She has taken a suspected assassin into her personal custody, allowed him access to classified information, and betrayed the trust of our people." Sam felt his blood chill as Malakar's declaration continued. The prince's voice rose to commanding volume. "As commander of the Valdorian military forces, I hereby invoke Emergency Protocol 7. All Valdorian personnel are to secure critical systems and detain any humans in positions of authority. Horizon Station is now under military control. Anyone resisting these orders will be treated as an enemy combatant." Alindra's face went white with shock and betrayal. "He cannot. The protocols require consent of the council. This is treason." But even as she spoke, the sound of boots echoed in the corridors outside, disciplined footsteps moving with military precision. Malachar had planned well. His forces were already in position. Sam grabbed both women and pulled them toward the maintenance access point he had used earlier. We need to move, now. They ran through narrow passages designed for equipment rather than people. Sam's knowledge of the station's infrastructure guiding them through a maze that would confuse any pursuit. Behind them, the sounds of Valdorian soldiers searching the observation deck faded into distance. They emerged in a storage section near the station's lower levels, surrounded by crates of supplies and equipment waiting for distribution. Sam sealed the access hatch behind them and turned to face his companions, his mind racing through possibilities and contingencies. Kira's voice carried urgent warning. My security credentials will be flagged. They'll know I didn't report to my assigned station. We have maybe 20 minutes before they start searching the maintenance levels. Elindra clutched the wall for support, her radiance flickering with distress. Nova, I cannot sense Nova. The bond between us is muted. Something is wrong. Sam felt cold certainty settle in his chest. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Malachar's timing, the completeness of his preparations, the severance of the Queen's connection to her guardian creature. His voice carried the weight of grim understanding. This isn't just a coup, it's a kidnapping. They're going to use you as a hostage, leverage against the Federation, proof of human perfidy. And whoever is really behind this gets their war. Alindra's starfire eyes met his, filled with fear and determination in equal measure. Then we must stop them, whatever it takes. Sam nodded, his resolve hardening into something that felt almost like purpose. He had spent years being invisible, being overlooked, being dismissed as irrelevant. Now invisibility was his greatest weapon, and he intended to use it. His voice dropped to a tone of battlefield command. Kira, I need you to access security systems. Find out where they're holding Nova. The Queen's Guardian is the key to breaking Malachar's control. Your Majesty, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Alindra reached out and took his hand, her cool fingers interlacing with his. I trust you, Samuel Mercer, more than I have trusted anyone in 50 years. Kira moved to a terminal hidden among the storage crates, her fingers flying across controls with practiced expertise. Sam stood guard at the access point, listening for signs of pursuit, his body remembering postures and alertness patterns from decades past. Finally, Kira's voice cut through the tension. Got it. Nova is being held in the research section, level 4. They've got some kind of containment field around it, and she trailed off, her face going pale. Sam moved to her side. What is it? Kira's voice shook slightly. There's a message in the system, encrypted, but I recognize the protocol. It's the same encryption my father used in his classified communications. She met Sam's eyes with desperate hope. He's still here, somewhere in the station's network. He's been watching everything. Before Sam could respond, a new alarm joined the cacophony echoing through the station. This one was different, more urgent, accompanied by flashing lights that indicated immediate danger rather than military alert. Kira's fingers danced across the terminal. Someone's triggered the station's self-destruct sequence. We have 30 minutes before Horizon Station becomes debris. Elindra's voice carried royal fury. Malachar would not destroy the station with himself aboard. This is someone else. Someone who wants to ensure no witnesses survive. Sam felt the pieces click together with terrible finality. The coup was not the endgame. It was a distraction, a way to create chaos while the real players made their moves. The Dowager Queen Seraphis, if she truly lived, was cleaning house, eliminating everyone who might expose her conspiracy, including her own son. His voice cut through the panic with calm determination. Then we have 30 minutes to stop a war, save a space station, and rescue a giant ball of living light. I've worked with worse deadlines. Well, Kira stared at him as if he had lost his mind. How can you joke at a time like this? Sam's smile was thin but genuine. Because if I don't laugh, I'll remember that I'm 68 years old with bad knees and I'm supposed to save the galaxy. He squared his shoulders and faced both women with the steady gaze of a man who had made peace with impossible odds. Let's move, we've got work to do. They slipped into the shadows of a station descending into chaos, Three unlikely allies against forces that wanted to burn the world. Behind them, the countdown continued its relentless progression toward annihilation. And somewhere in the station's depths, a consciousness that had once been Robert Haynes watched and waited, knowing that the moment he had prepared for across 30 years was finally at hand. The maintenance corridors of Horizon Station had become a labyrinth of shadows and danger, every junction potentially hiding Valdorian soldiers searching for the fugitive queen and her human protectors. Sam led them through passages he had memorized over 3 years of invisible service, his knowledge of the station's infrastructure now the difference between survival and capture. Kira moved behind him with the controlled precision of military training, her weapon drawn and ready, despite knowing it would do little against superior Valdorian forces. Alindra followed last, her silver radiance deliberately dimmed to avoid detection, her breathing labored from exertion and the severed connection to Nova that clearly caused her physical distress. The countdown continued its merciless progression. 26 minutes until the station's self-destruct sequence completed its cycle and turned Horizon into expanding debris. Sam paused at a junction, listening for movement in the corridors ahead. His ears caught the distant rhythm of boots, a patrol passing through an intersection 2 levels above. He waited until the sound faded, then gestured for his companions to follow. Kira's whisper carried tension and urgency. The research section is 3 levels up. We'll have to pass through at least 2 security checkpoints. Sam's response came with the calm of experience. Not if we go through the environmental control hub. It connects to every section of the station, and nobody guards it because nobody thinks it's important. The irony was not lost on him. He had spent years being dismissed as unimportant, working in spaces that powerful people considered beneath their notice. Now that invisibility had become his greatest tactical advantage, they reached the environmental hub without incident, a cramped space filled with humming machinery and blinking status displays. Sam navigated through the equipment with familiar ease, leading them toward an access point that would deposit them directly adjacent to the research section where Nova was being held. Alindra stumbled against a support beam, her strength clearly failing. Sam caught her arm and steadied her, feeling the coolness of her skin even through his sleeve. Her voice emerged weak but determined. The bond with Nova, it sustains me more than I realized. Without it, I am diminished. Sam's jaw tightened with resolve. Then we get Nova back. Simple as that. Kira had moved ahead to scout the access point, her posture tense with alertness. She returned with information that darkened her expression further. Her report came in clipped military cadence. 4 guards on the containment chamber. Valdorian military, armed with pulse weapons. The field around Nova is being generated by equipment I don't recognize. Sam considered their options, his mind running through scenarios with the speed of battlefield calculation. Direct assault was suicide. They lacked the firepower, the numbers, and the element of surprise. But they had something the guards did not expect. A maintenance worker who knew every system on the station intimately. His voice dropped to instructional tones. Kira, I need you to access the environmental controls for the research section, specifically the oxygen regulation system. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You want to knock them out? Sam nodded. Reduce oxygen concentration gradually. They'll feel dizzy, then sleepy, then unconscious. By the time they realize something's wrong, they won't be able to respond effectively. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. Your father taught me this. In the desert, when we needed to extract wounded from a building held by hostiles, sometimes the quietest solution is the best one. Kira's expression shifted, grief and pride mingling in equal measure. She moved to the environmental controls and began the delicate process of adjusting atmospheric composition for the research section. Sam turned to Alindra, who had managed to straighten despite her weakness. Her luminous gaze met his with trust that he felt unworthy of receiving. His voice softened. When we get Nova back, can you stop the self-destruct? The Queen's response carried royal certainty beneath physical frailty. Nova can interface with any system on the station. If I am reunited with my guardian, I can stop anything. 22 minutes remaining. Kira's voice cut through the tension. They're down. All 4 guards showing unconscious on the biosensors. Sam moved immediately, leading them through the access point into the research section. The corridor beyond was clinical and cold, designed for scientific investigation rather than comfort. They found the guards slumped against walls and door frames, their weapons fallen from nerveless fingers, their breathing slow but steady. The containment chamber occupied the center of the section, a spherical enclosure surrounded by equipment that hummed with unfamiliar energy. Inside, Nova pulsed weakly, its radiance diminished to a fraction of its normal brilliance. The creature's light flickered erratically, suggesting pain or distress that Sam could not fully comprehend. Alindra pressed her hands against the containment field and cried out as energy crackled across her skin. Nova responded with a surge of light, straining toward its queen despite the barriers between them. Her voice broke with desperation. "The field is designed to suppress our bond. I cannot reach Nova while it remains active." Sam examined the equipment generating the containment field, his maintenance experience allowing him to identify components and connections that would be meaningless to others. The technology was hybrid, combining Valdorian energy manipulation with human engineering principles. Someone had built this specifically to imprison beings like Nova. Kira joined him at the controls, her security training providing complementary expertise. There's a master shutdown, but it requires dual authorization, Valdorian biometrics, and a human security code. Sam's communicator buzzed with an incoming message. Robert Haynes. The message contained a string of numbers and letters that Sam recognized immediately as a security authorization code. Below it, a single line of text. "I have been waiting 30 years for this moment. Free Nova. Save the Queen. End this." Sam entered the code while Alindra pressed her palm against the biometric scanner. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the containment field flickered, destabilized, and collapsed entirely. Nova exploded from its prison with a surge of radiance that filled the entire section with golden light. The creature spiraled around its queen, its luminescence intensifying as the bond between them restored. Alindra gasped and straightened, strength flowing back into her form as Nova's energy merged with her own. Alindra's voice resonated with restored authority. "The self-destruct. Nova can access the station's systems now." The guardian creature pulsed once, twice, and Sam's communicator displayed a new message. "Self-destruct sequence suspended. Manual override required for reactivation." 18 minutes had remained on the countdown. They had bought themselves time, but the crisis was far from resolved. Sam allowed himself a moment of relief before reality reasserted itself. Malachar still controlled the station. Valdorian soldiers still hunted them. And somewhere in the shadows, the true architect of this conspiracy waited. His voice cut through the momentary calm. "We need to find Malachar, end this coup before it spirals further out of control." Nova pulsed with agitation, its patterns conveying information that only Alindra could fully interpret. The Queen's expression shifted to alarm. Her voice carried urgent warning. Nova senses something else, another presence on the station, someone whose emotional signature is ancient, cold, calculating. Her starfire eyes widened with dawning horror. "My mother! She is here! She has been here all along!" The words hit Sam like ice water. The Dowager Queen Seraphis had not simply orchestrated this conspiracy from afar. She had come to witness its culmination personally. They moved through the station toward the command center, Nova leading the way. The guardian creature's radiance cleared paths through darkness and confusion, its protective light unmistakable to any Valdorian who encountered them. The command center occupied the highest level of Horizon Station, a circular chamber with panoramic views of the starfield. At the center stood Prince Malachar, his military uniform disheveled, his luminescent skin flickering with unstable colors. But he was not alone. Behind him, seated on a chair that had been placed to overlook the entire chamber like a throne, sat a figure that made Alindra stop dead in her tracks. Dowager Queen Seraphis looked nothing like the frail elder who had supposedly died 75 years ago. Her moonlit skin blazed with vitality, her eyes burned with cold fire, and her bearing radiated the particular cruelty of someone who had spent centuries learning to see other beings as pieces on a game board. Her voice cut through the shocked silence like a blade. "My daughter, how disappointing that you survived. I had hoped Malachar's soldiers would handle the details, but incompetence seems to run in his bloodline." Malachar's expression crumbled with confusion and betrayal. Mother, you told me. You said this was about protecting our people. You said sister was leading us to destruction. Seraphis did not bother to look at her son, her attention fixed on Alindra with predatory intensity. I told you what you needed to hear to serve my purposes. You were always the weaker child, Malachar. Eager to please, desperate for approval, so easily manipulated by anyone who offered validation. The prince's skin flickered through colors that suggested his entire worldview collapsing. Sam recognized the expression. He had seen it on the faces of soldiers who discovered their cause was a lie. Alindra stepped forward, her restored power evident in every line of her posture. You have been alive all this time, hiding, plotting, murdering anyone who came too close to the truth. Seraphis smiled, and the expression held no warmth whatsoever. Robert Haynes discovered my network 30 years ago. He was clever for a human. He traced communications that should have been untraceable, identified operatives who should have been invisible. I had him eliminated before he could expose what I had built. Her cold gaze shifted to Kira, who stood rigid with fury. His daughter has the same persistence. She has been investigating her father's death for years, getting closer and closer. I intended to deal with her eventually. Kira's voice emerged rough with controlled rage. You murdered my father. You let me spend 30 years believing it was an accident. Seraphis's response carried dismissive contempt. Your father was a threat to plans that had been developing for centuries. His death was necessary, just as all your deaths are necessary now. She gestured, and Sam noticed for the first time the device she held in her withered hand, a control unit of some kind, its surface covered with symbols he could not read. Alindra recognized it immediately, her voice sharp with alarm. The self-destruct. You triggered it. You have the manual override. Seraphis's smile widened. Correct. When this station explodes, it will kill the Queen of the Valdorian Federation, the human delegation, and hundreds of witnesses from dozens of species. The evidence will suggest human sabotage. War will follow, and in the chaos, I will emerge from the shadows to restore order. Her expression twisted with ancient grievance. I should have been the one to lead our people into the Galactic Age. Instead, your father chose you for the throne. His naive daughter who believed peace was possible with primitives who had barely learned to walk upright. Tonight, I correct that mistake. Sam had been moving slowly during Seraphis's monologue, positioning himself between the Dowager Queen and the main control console. His mind raced through options, calculating distances and timing. The device in her hand was the key. If he could reach it, disable it, they might have a chance. His voice emerged calm, conversational, designed to keep her attention. You've been planning this for how long? Centuries? And you're going to throw it all away for revenge against your own daughter? Seraphis's cold eyes fixed on him with amused contempt. The human maintenance worker who somehow charmed his way into my daughter's confidence. Robert Haynes chose well when he selected you as his instrument. Invisible, forgettable, the perfect spy. Her smile sharpened. But you are out of your depth here, human. This is not a game you can win. Sam took another small step, his movements disguised as nervous shifting. Maybe not, but I've learned something in 68 years of fixing broken things. His voice dropped to a register that carried unexpected weight. The most important repairs usually happen where nobody's watching. The hands that keep systems running. The hearts that choose kindness when cruelty would be easier. The quiet decisions to see people instead of enemies. He met her ancient eyes directly. You've spent centuries building this conspiracy, but you forgot something fundamental. The invisible workers, the forgotten ones, the people you never bothered to notice because they weren't important enough to threaten you. Seraphis's expression flickered with irritation. Is this supposed to be inspiring? A final speech before your inevitable death? Sam's response came with the calm of absolute certainty. No, it's a distraction. He lunged for the device in her hand, his body moving with speed that surprised even himself. Combat reflexes buried for decades surged to the surface, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought would have been too slow. Seraphis reacted instantly, her own centuries of survival instincts triggering a defensive response. Energy crackled from her free hand, a pulse of force that should have thrown Sam across the room. Nova intercepted it. The guardian creature blazed with protective radiance, absorbing the attack and redirecting it harmlessly into the station's structure. In the fraction of a second that Seraphis spent reacting to this interference, Sam's hand closed around the control device. They struggled, the ancient Valdorian queen and the elderly human maintenance worker, locked in a contest that would determine the fate of civilizations. Sam's muscles screamed with effort, his joints protesting the strain, his heart pounding with exertion that his body was not designed to sustain. But he held on. He held on because Robert had trusted him, because Elindra believed in him, because somewhere in the station's network, a dead man's consciousness was watching and hoping. Kira moved in from the side, her security training guiding her to the optimal angle of attack. She grabbed Seraphis's arm and twisted, breaking the Dowager Queen's grip on the device. It clattered to the floor, and Sam kicked it away from both of them. Seraphis screamed with fury, centuries of carefully maintained composure shattering in an instant. She threw both humans aside with a surge of strength that should have been impossible for her apparent age, her silver skin blazing with power she had kept hidden. But Elindra was ready. The Queen of 47 Worlds faced her mother with 3 centuries of accumulated wisdom and power. Nova circled both of them, its radiance creating a barrier that contained their confrontation within a sphere of light. Elindra's voice carried the weight of everything she had learned since taking the throne. You taught me that power was the only thing that mattered, that compassion was weakness, that other species existed only to be conquered or controlled. She stepped closer, her starfire eyes blazing. You were wrong about everything. Wow, Seraphis's response was a snarl of contempt. I built empires while you played diplomat with primitives. I shaped galactic politics for centuries while you squandered our influence on peace treaties and cultural exchanges. You are not worthy of the throne I was denied. Mother and daughter circled each other within Nova's containment, their power building toward a confrontation that had been inevitable since Elindra chose a different path. Sam pulled himself to his feet, his body aching but functional. He found the control device and examined it quickly, his maintenance experience allowing him to identify the critical components. The self-destruct was still suspended, but Seraphis had been preparing to reactivate it. His voice cut through the tension. Your Majesty, I can disable this permanently, but I need time. Elindra nodded without breaking eye contact with her mother. Do it, I will handle this. Sam worked with desperate efficiency, his fingers finding connections and pathways that his conscious mind barely understood. Kira stood guard beside him, her weapon trained on the sphere of light where the 2 queens faced each other. Inside that sphere, Elindra spoke again, her voice softer now. I used to wonder why you were so angry, why nothing I did was ever good enough, why you looked at me with such disappointment even when I succeeded beyond everyone's expectations. Seraphis's cold expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. Elindra continued, Then I took the throne and discovered what it truly meant to carry the weight of worlds. The loneliness, the isolation, the endless pressure to be perfect, to never show weakness, to make decisions that would affect billions of lives. Her voice cracked slightly. And I understood. You were not disappointed in me. You were jealous. Jealous that I received what you believed was rightfully yours. Seraphis's response emerged as barely a whisper. Your father promised me the throne. We were to rule together. Then he chose you, his precious daughter, and cast me aside like a worn-out garment. For the first time, Sam heard genuine emotion in the Dowager Queen's voice. Not the cold calculation of a master conspirator, but the raw wound of ancient betrayal. Elindra's expression shifted to something approaching compassion. Father was wrong to treat you that way. His choice caused you pain that never healed. But your response was to inflict that pain on everyone around you. On Malachar, who only ever wanted your approval. On me, who spent centuries trying to earn your respect. On Robert Haynes and Ambassador Webb, and everyone else who stood in the way of your revenge. She reached out slowly, her hand extending toward her mother. It ends tonight, not with more death, not with war, with you facing the truth of what you've become and choosing something different. Seraphis stared at the offered hand, her expression cycling through emotions too complex to name. For a moment, just a moment, Sam thought he saw the woman she might have been if circumstances had been different. If her husband had not betrayed her. If her pain had not calcified into hatred over centuries of nursing grievances. Then her expression hardened, and she raised her hand to strike. Malachar moved. The prince, forgotten in the confrontation between mother and daughter, threw himself between them. Seraphis's attack struck him full in the chest, energy meant for Elindra tearing through her son instead. Malachar crumpled to the floor, his luminescent skin flickering erratically. Seraphis stood frozen, her hands still raised, staring at what she had done. Elindra dropped to her knees beside her brother, her hands pressing against his wound with desperate urgency. Nova wrapped around them both, its radiance pulsing with healing energy that might or might not be enough. Sam finished disabling the control device and moved towards Seraphis, his body protesting every step. The Dowager Queen made no move to resist as he approached. She stood motionless, her eyes fixed on her dying son. His voice came out gentler than he expected. "It's over. You've lost. The only question now is what happens next." Seraphis's response was barely audible. "I killed him. My son. I killed my son." Sam had seen this before in the desert, when soldiers realized the true cost of their actions. The moment when ideology crumbled and only humanity remained. He took no satisfaction in her suffering. His voice carried the weight of experience. "You can still choose differently. Help us save him. Help us save everyone. It won't undo what you've done, but it's a start." Seraphis looked at him then, her ancient eyes meeting his with something that might have been recognition. Two beings at the end of their roads, one who had chosen destruction and one who had chosen repair. Her voice emerged as barely a whisper. How? How do I choose differently after everything I've done?" Sam's response came from somewhere deep and true. "The same way everyone does, one decision at a time. Starting now." Seraphis moved to where her children knelt, her hands joining Elindra's in applying pressure to Malachar's wound. Her touch triggered something in Nova, the guardian creature's healing radiance intensifying as it recognized the combined bloodline of the royal house. Malachar's vital signs stabilized. His skin stopped flickering. His breathing steadied. Sam watched the three of them, mother and daughter and son, united for the first time in centuries by the simple act of choosing life over death. It was not forgiveness. It was not redemption. It was only a beginning, but beginnings were enough. The broadcast reached every screen on Horizon Station and transmitted to receivers across both civilizations. Queen Elindra spoke of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed everything, of her mother's role in orchestrating decades of manipulation, of her brother's unwitting participation and ultimate choice to protect rather than harm. She did not name individual perpetrators beyond her immediate family. She focused on the importance of unity, on the need to rebuild trust between species, on the hope that this crisis would ultimately strengthen rather than weaken the alliance. Malachar spoke briefly, his voice rough with pain but sincere. He accepted responsibility for his actions, apologized to those he had endangered, and pledged his remaining years to building the peace he had nearly destroyed. Seraphis did not speak publicly. She had surrendered herself to Valdorian justice, her fate to be determined by councils and courts that would take years to render judgment. But she had provided something valuable in exchange for consideration. Complete documentation of her conspiracy, including the names of every operative, every bribed official, every hidden account and secret facility. The cleanup would take decades, but it would happen. When it was Sam's turn to speak, he found himself facing audiences across two civilizations, his weathered face filling screens that usually showed politicians and celebrities. His words came slowly, drawn from depths he rarely acknowledged. "I'm 68 years old. I've spent most of my life fixing things that other people broke. Pipes, air filters, machines that stopped working the way they should. Tonight, I helped fix something bigger than plumbing. Something that matters more than any toilet I've ever repaired." He paused, gathering thoughts that had been forming since he first took Elindra's hand on the dance floor. His voice strengthened with conviction. "I've learned that the most important work usually happens where nobody's watching. The hands that keep systems running, the hearts that choose kindness when cruelty would be easier, the quiet decisions to see people instead of enemies. Those are the things that actually hold civilizations together. Sam looked directly into the camera, seeing beyond it to the millions of beings who would receive his words. We came close to war tonight, not because most people wanted it, but because a few people with power decided their interests mattered more than everyone else's lives. That's always how it happens. The many pay for the ambitions of the few. His final words carried the weight of everything he had learned. But here's what I know after 68 years of watching people from the shadows. Most of us just want the same things. Safety for our families, purpose for our days, someone who sees us when we feel invisible. Those desires don't change based on what planet you're from or what color your skin is. And as long as we remember that, the people who want to divide us will always fail. A message appeared on the command center console after the broadcast ended, originating from within the station's network. Robert Haynes, final transmission. The message opened into a video file, and Sam found himself looking at a face he had not seen in 30 years. Robert appeared exactly as he had during their time together in the Gulf War. Young and vital and alive with purpose. Robert's recorded voice filled the command center. Sam, if you're seeing this, then you've done what I hoped you would do. You've stopped the immediate threat and uncovered the conspiracy that I gave my life to expose. Kira moved to stand beside Sam, her face pale with shock as she watched her father speak from beyond death. The recording continued. 30 years ago, I discovered what Seraphis was planning. I tried to stop it through official channels, but her influence ran too deep. She had me killed, but I had already taken precautions. Valdorian technology allowed me to transfer a copy of my consciousness into their network. I became a ghost in the machine, watching, waiting, gathering evidence for the day when someone I trusted could finish what I started. Robert's expression softened with paternal love. Kira, my daughter, I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you. I'm sorry I had to let you believe I was dead. But I want you to know that I watched you grow through every camera, every sensor, every network connection I could access. I saw you become a woman of courage and principle. I am so proud of you. Kira's composure shattered, tears streaming down her face as her father's voice washed over her. Robert's final words carried the weight of legacy. The evidence I gathered is now in the hands of both governments. Everything needed to expose the remaining conspirators and bring them to justice. My time in this network is ending. The systems that sustained me are failing, but I go knowing that I left the future in good hands. Take care of each other. Build the peace that so many have died for. And remember that the stars are beautiful, but it's the people beside you who make them worth reaching for. The recording ended, and silence filled the command center. 6 months later, Samuel Mercer stood in an office that bore his name on the door. The plaque read Special Advisor for Human Valdorian Relations, a title created specifically for him. His desk held photographs that told the story of his new life. Sarah, his daughter, beaming at her father's inauguration ceremony. Kira Valdos, now Captain Valdos, commanding the first integrated human Valdorian security force. Robert Haynes in an image recovered from military archives, his smile carrying quiet confidence. And Alindra, captured in a moment of unguarded joy, her those impossible eyes bright with happiness she had rediscovered after 50 years of lonely rule. The door chimed, and Kira entered with confident stride. Her new uniform bore insignia from both civilizations. Her voice carried warm respect. Advisor Mercer, the delegation from the Centauri sector has arrived. They're requesting your presence at the welcome reception. Sam rose from his desk. Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. And Kira, how many times have I told you to call me Sam? Kira smiled with echoes of her father's warmth. Approximately 47 times, sir. I'll keep counting. Sam found Alindra on the observation deck, her silver form silhouetted against the starfield. Nova circled her lazily, its radiance content and peaceful. Her voice carried teasing warmth. You came quickly. I hope I'm not interfering with important diplomatic duties. Sam moved to stand beside her. The Centauri delegation can wait. They've been traveling for 6 weeks. Another 10 minutes won't hurt them. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Earth turn below. Alindra broke the silence. Do you regret it, leaving your old life behind? Sam considered carefully. Sarah said something to me last week. She said that for the first time in years, she hears me living when I talk instead of just existing. She said I sound like I did when her mother was alive. Alindra's hand found his. And do you? Want to wake up? Sam turned to face her. More than I have in 6 years. More than I thought I ever would again. Music began to play softly. Alindra's voice carried playful challenge. Dance with me, Samuel Mercer. Sam took her hand and drew her close, his movements confident now. They danced together on the observation deck, two beings from different worlds finding rhythm in each other. Alindra's voice murmured against his chest. You have improved remarkably. Sam's response carried gentle humor. When I found something worth learning for. She pulled back to meet his eyes, tears glistening. I spent 50 years believing I would never feel happiness again. Then a human maintenance worker stumbled into my life and reminded me that the universe still holds surprises. Sam brushed a tear from her silver cheek. I spent 6 years believing I was already dead. Then an alien queen looked at me like I mattered, and I remembered what it felt like to be alive. Nova wrapped them both in radiance that felt like blessing. Sam's voice emerged as barely a whisper. I'm 68 years old. I've fixed more broken things than I can count. But you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth fixing too. Alindra's response was not words but action, her lips meeting his in a kiss that bridged centuries and civilizations. When they separated, Sam looked out at the stars and felt peace settle into places that had been empty for far too long. The observation deck door opened. Kira's voice carried apologetic urgency. Sir, the Centauri delegation is getting restless. Sam laughed. Tell them I'm on my way. And Kira, for the 48th time, call me Sam. He turned to Alindra. Duty calls. Her response carried warm promise. Tonight, we have more dancing to do. Sam walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold to look back at the Queen of 47 Worlds. His voice carried everything he felt. You know, I spent my whole life waiting to matter to someone. Turns out I just needed to be patient enough to find the right someone. Alindra's smile could have illuminated solar systems, and I spent 3 centuries believing power was a substitute for connection. We were both wrong. Fortunately, we found each other before it was too late. Sam stepped through the door, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. Behind him, Nova's radiance painted the stars with light, and somewhere in the vastness of space, the consciousness that had once been Robert Haynes finally allowed itself to rest, satisfied that his legacy was secure. The maintenance worker from Ohio had become a bridge between worlds, and the universe was better for his presence in it. Samuel Mercer had spent his life fixing broken things. In the end, the most important thing he fixed was himself.